From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. We had a busy week this week. We've got a lot of announcements, including us appearing as guests on another podcast, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Yes. And now, broadcasting from Rockefeller Center, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tansman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
Yeah, Rockefeller Center,
or
a.k.a.
whatever.
Jim's Sex Dungeon. I feel like,
yeah, why is everything sticky?
Yeah. You know exactly why. You were here for the fantasy football draft. You know what went on here.
So we are still without a home.
That's right.
Well, we have a home. It was just destroyed.
Yeah, that's right. It was Rob's line. So now we just don't have a place with real microphones and a real studio.
We thought we'd be back at level 9, but
still not ready.
Not.
Still not ready. But I do shout some love for Scott because he actually retweeted us on Twitter. And it's really funny because like he retweets, he's like, oh, I miss these guys or something like that. You know, check this podcast out. And it's really like, I realize he's just a listener to the show. And so, hi, Scott, we miss you, dude. And it's just so funny. I kind of imagined like him, like, you know, just staring into his phone, like rubbing it with one finger.
Imagining that he's there.
Yeah. Like that's right. He puts it in the other room and then listens to it so he can pretend like he's in the engineering booth. So they're like laughing. Ha, good one, Nick.
That's probably
you,
not what's happening, but that's how I choose to think about it.
Yeah, that's the fiction I want to live in. So, but no, one day we'll be back at level 9 if he chooses to keep that name. But he's relocating, and in the meantime, we have been having fun field trips. We appeared in Nick's blanket fort. We appeared in my office. That was a lot of fun. And this time we are in my home office / sex dungeon. So, yeah, a lot of fun. And we pulled out all the whips and chains, and now we've got a nice little studio set up. And,
it does look like a very boring
sex dungeon.
I'll give you
the most
that.
vanilla sex dungeon you've ever seen. Yeah, the most exciting thing in this room is, like, my imitation Asian, like, faux wall thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what that's for?
No.
So,
it's like a dressing area.
Yeah, right.
So
it looks like a little partition thing,
yeah.
right? That's to put behind me whenever I'm counseling people via my webcam. That way they don't see, like, a bed in the background and, like, my kids' toys and stuff. So,
what I really like about this room is the ambient drum sound.
Yeah. There's just this faintest hum of somebody's drums. Because Nevada houses, you can hear through them.
Yes, and apparently there's a garage band next door. But we did appear on another podcast, so I want to talk about that. Big shout out to Fan Theory World.
So much fun.
So they had us on for this week's episode. I think it's this episode goes out Thursday, so I think theirs goes out Sunday or Monday.
I think it's Monday. They actually tweeted and said it's going to be Monday.
Okay, and everybody check out that episode. It is actually is probably the most fun I've ever had doing a podcast.
Yeah, so what we did for the episode was they gave us fictional characters from different shows, and we diagnosed their mental illnesses and or like talked about how we would treat them.
Yes.
It was wild, man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. I'll tease a little bit of the show so that you can check it out because you'll be interested. Tune in to find out which character on Nickelodeon we believe is addicted to methamphetamine. Or I guess I shouldn't speak for Nick. I sincerely believe this.
I think it's I
gave a compelling case, didn't I? It was a compelling case. I feel like I made the argument. So
I think
I started kind of drawing you in.
Yeah, the more now when I watch that show, that's all I think about.
That's right.
But it is a great podcast. If you haven't already heard about it, you should check it out because it's very addictive.
Fan Theory World.
Fan Theory World.
FTW, like for the win, but Fan Theory World.
I actually started when I saw the podcast. I looked through their catalog, and of course I started with the ones I was most interested in, which was like the Star Wars ones, and then just kind of went on from there. And then the next thing I know, I'm listening to like the one on Powerpuff Girls.
Oh yeah,
and all that.
And
it's
like
really
deep.
Yeah, so shows that I have nothing that I've never even seen before, but it's like you get into it, and it's like really entertaining.
I got drawn into their Winnie the Pooh episode, and that was like one that It was funny. Like when they were done with that episode, I like had a whiteboard that looked like a physicist whiteboard, like with all these like arrows and like red string, like a conspiracy theory. I was like, oh my god, they're right.
Connecting all the dots.
It all makes sense. But yeah, highly recommend their podcast. And Eric and James, thank you so much for hosting us, and we hope to collaborate with you again. That was a lot of fun.
Definitely was. Thank you.
So usually we start the show by kind of introducing some new research or something that's kind of hot off the press, and give people kind of a quick view about something that's interesting in the world of psychology. But what's important too to realize for our listeners is that therapists and the science of psychology is not a consensus, right? It's not something that everybody always agrees all the time. It is like any other form of science. It is messy, and it has lots of rigor and lots of challenging discussions, and it's very, I think deep and philosophical at times. And I wanted to introduce this article, Nick, because I subscribe to Psychology Today. And I don't recommend it. I don't think anybody should ever do that. Okay. It is bogus. It's not a lot of good things. But I have to because I'm listed there as a therapist, and so I get a free copy of the magazine, and I also get emails of all the articles that are up there. And so recently I received an article that I kind of had to click because I was like, what? And, just really upset about it. And it was basically saying that porn addiction is proven bogus. And so I wanted to kind of present what the article kind of said and what the author was saying. And then I just want to workshop it and just talk a little bit because I think that, again, psychology is a rigorous science. There's a lot here to discuss. And I really want to unpack it because listeners of the show know that I've gotten on a soapbox about some of this a little bit before. And I want to make sure I'm presenting the other side, and I want to have a discussion about it. So this article was written by Dr. David Ley, Ley. He's a clinical psychologist, and he's a sex advocate, and he sort of lays out the case for porn addiction not being real. He does this by citing new research about the connection between religiosity and moral opposition to pornography. So he takes the entire article from a standpoint of what new research tells us about how people who have religious views feel or sense a moral objection or opposition to pornography, and he uses that to sort of make the case for why there's no such thing as porn addiction. So let me kind of unpack what he says here. So to quote the article a little bit, he says, the researchers lay out their argument and theory extremely thoroughly, suggesting that pornography problems due to moral incongruence, which he calls PPMI, appear to be the driving force in many of the people who report dysregulated, uncontrollable, or problematic pornography use. Even though many people who grew up in religious, sexually conservative households have strong negative feelings about pornography, many of those same people continue to use pornography. And then they feel guilty and ashamed of their behavior and angry at themselves and their sexual desire to watch more porn. So then he continues in the article. He says, this meta-analysis, he's quoting this research, found that, and this is a quote from the paper, moral incongruence around pornography use is consistently the best predictor of the belief one is experiencing pornography-related problems or dysregulation. And comparisons of aggregate effects reveal that it is consistently a much better predictor than pornography use itself. And then he continues the article. I just want to give a little bit more quotes for the audience. The ideas of pornography addiction, or he says this, he says, if the ideas of pornography addiction were true, then porn-related problems would go up regardless of morality, as porn use goes up. But the researchers didn't find that. In fact, they cite numerous studies showing that even feeling like you struggle to control your porn use doesn't actually predict more porn use. What that means is that the people who report great anguish over controlling their porn use aren't actually using more porn. They just feel worse about it. And then this is the biggest point of the article, and I want to make sure everybody's listening to this, because so far I've kind of laid the premise. His argument is that there's some research that says that if you have religious views, you're more likely to feel guilty about using porn, and it's that guilt that we use to define addiction. Therefore, there's no such thing as porn addiction. There's really just religious objection. And here's the final bit that kind of slams his article shut. He says, clinicians who continue to promote the idea of porn addiction are, like those who promote age regression hypnosis or recovered memory therapy, engaging in harmful malpractice. Websites and advocacy groups who promote and encourage the identification as a porn addict are doing harm to their followers and are like the hucksters who promote naturopathic treatment, despite federal medical groups identifying these treatments as ineffective and potentially harmful. Ultimately, all should be held accountable for their inaccurate, outdated, and exploitative actions. So,
okay,
that was bold, right? So again, I realized that there was a lot of jargon in there, and this was a research-driven article. So I'm going to quickly summarize and translate everything I just said. This guy, Dr. David Ley, basically said there's no such thing as pornography addiction. And his reasoning is that there's research that now says if you come from a religious background, you feel guilt and shame about using porn. But that doesn't stop you from using porn. So if we ask you if porn is a problem in your life, you'll say yes, and you'll report that you feel very bad about it. And he says, see, those people that feel really bad about it aren't addicted. That's not the problem. The problem is they have religious sensibilities. And that's the problem. Because we can detect the nature of their sadness, not to the porn use itself, but to the religious undergirdings that feel shame about using porn, therefore there's no such thing about porn addiction, it's all a lie. And then he takes it very far and says, anybody who even says that porn addiction is a thing or compulsive sexual things are a thing, they are malpracticing. It is outside of ethics, and you are in the same category as people who do like snake oil medicine, which is a big, huge statement. So Nick,
sure,
big pile of stuff there. What's your first read on some of that?
Up until the last paragraph, I was kind of on board with a lot of it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the two states that have the highest occurrence of porn addiction are Utah and Mississippi.
Okay, so the argument would be religious places.
Also, yes, the two most religious states.
I would argue they're places that don't have a lot going on. They're boring places.
There's
Nick.
a lot of hiking in Utah.
Not enough to take you away from that internet.
Now, I don't know. I think I do see. I mean, there's a lot of correlation there. So I do see that there is something there with the religious component. I wouldn't go so far as to say then that that porn addiction can't happen, or that it's bogus.
Right.
If anything, I think you have a stronger argument to say that it's more difficult to diagnose.
Right.
Because I do think you have to filter out that piece of it.
Right.
I mean, if we took the exact same criteria with alcohol use disorder and factored in religious beliefs.
Sure.
You know, so if we lived in a primarily Muslim community,
yes,
or state where alcohol is forbidden,
right,
and there are people who are drinking, yeah, they will report the same thing. They will report that
they feel really bad about it.
That they feel terrible about it.
And comparatively, you'll say, oh, those guys seem to report more distress than these other folks that don't share that tradition or that heritage.
And if that was the only criteria under which we would diagnose that disorder,
yes, okay,
then we'd have a good argument.
That's the thing. And that's the thing I want to zoom in on, because you just hit it. And I agree with you. There's an interesting piece of correlation here, right? And we talk about this all the time, that correlation in data is not causation in data.
Right.
So what this research uncovered to me is people who are religious report more clinically significant distress regarding this particular behavior. But what Dr. Ley, I think, misunderstands is that clinically significant amount of distress, yes, that's how we diagnose most illnesses. That is not the singular criteria of addiction. Right. That is not how we figure it out.
It's a
and
must.
His whole article
it's a starting
is like that.
point.
Yeah,
There's
his whole article is founded on refuting, saying, oh, I found it, everybody. There it is, the smoking gun. The only reason anybody's sad about using porn is because they're religious. Done. And it's like, that's irrelevant. Like, I don't care if you're sad or not about your drinking. In fact, most addicts I know don't have any remorse. Like, they're using meth, or they're using heroin, or they're using alcohol. A criteria that we use in diagnosing that is not their own self-awareness of whether this is a problem. It's other criteria, like using despite negative consequences. If you're watching porn at work and you get fired from work because you can't stop, it's compulsive. I don't care whether or not you have any sense of shame about it. That's irrelevant to the diagnosis of addiction.
Yeah, so if we look at, if we use those same criteria, right, where we're saying that continued use despite efforts to quit.
Right.
So failed attempts to quit.
Right.
That is a criteria. We never really ask, well, what's your motive for wanting to quit?
Right.
And when we
it's
do,
irrelevant.
If we do ask that,
it
doesn't
treatment.
Factor into
it has nothing to do with
diagnosis.
Yeah, that's just a treatment capital, right? Like if you say, hey, man, I really want to quit because my daughter got taken by CPS and I want to get her back. Okay, that's valuable to me as a therapist, right? Because now I know what your motivations are. But that's irrelevant. I don't write to the insurance and go, hey, I want to diagnose this guy as a methamphetamine addict, but he doesn't feel any remorse.
Well,
so I guess he's fine.
Or, I guess the reason why somebody wanted to quit, it doesn't have to make sense. What we look at is, have they attempted and were they able to stick with it? So if I'm an alcoholic and let's say my reason for wanting to quit is just crazy and stupid. I want to quit drinking because all of my favorite NASCAR drivers, when they are sponsored by an alcohol company, their careers fall apart and I always get disappointed because they never win the cup.
Right.
Whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. It would irrelevant. Be, I want to quit, but I can't
quit. Yeah, and that's the key. And so, this is why I brought this article up, because A, he's a published author. He ought to know better. He's a clinical psychologist. But this goes back to how little training everybody has in addiction. And it really bugs me, because they're misunderstanding that if this guy had said that exact same article and said there's no such thing as alcohol addiction, there's no such thing as alcoholism, because I have found correlation that religious people feel worse about drinking than non-religious people. That would be laughed out of the academy. Your scholarship card would be revoked. You'd be disinvited from every conference. But he gets away with it when we're talking about sex, because it's this nebulous void. If you did the same thing about gambling. If you said there's no such thing about gambling addiction, there's no such thing. Because religious people, they feel worse about it when they go home. Okay, because in Islam it teaches you're not allowed to gamble, so they feel worse about it. That's irrelevant to the diagnosis. So really quick, can you kind of recap because again, this is your specialty, right? Addiction is the thing. But the criteria that you're looking for, Nick, you're not necessarily looking for, do they feel sad about what they did? That's meaningful to you, but that's not how you diagnose addiction.
Right. No, there's 11 different criteria. Continued use despite negative consequences. There is
a craving cycle.
Tolerance. There's withdrawal symptoms. There's previous failed attempts to cut down or quit. So,
which is huge.
Preoccupation. So this
fantasizing,
is
obsession.
Yeah, your mind is always on it. So if you're not using, you're thinking about it or planning it or doing all that. It consumes your day.
Not one of that cites the Bible. And says, and if you are in disobedience of the second commandment, then maybe you're an addict. That has nothing to do with it. But part of this debate that I think is really meaningful, and Dr. Lay, takes an issue with this, is that the World Health Organization and the ICD-11. So for those who don't know, there's the DSM-5, right, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for psychology, right? So we call it the Psychology Bible. It's kind of the database that we look to diagnose. There's also something called the ICD. The ICD is the international code set that is sort of used throughout all of medicine. So if you break your arm and you go to your doctor has to report to the insurance what it is they're there helping you with, and they'll find a code in the ICD codes, which ICD-10 is the current edition, that says broken arm. Mm-hmm. And so then they'll give that to the insurance, and then the insurance looks at it and says, oh, G13, okay, broken arm. So there are codes that have to do with mental health and behavioral health, usually F codes. And in the next iteration of the ICD, version 11, it's going to have in there compulsive sexual behavior disorder. And this was at the firm suggestion of the World Health Organization, who believes that this is something that needs to be looked at. And Dr. Lay takes huge issue with this, as are a lot of sex advocates, and saying, oh my gosh, you're pathologizing sex. You're making sex a disease. The fact that somebody has a very healthy sexual appetite is not a disease. And again, this is like the marijuana lobby saying, oh, you're pathologizing marijuana use, or the alcohol lobby saying you're pathologizing alcohol. It's not that. We don't have a problem with that.
And you can make the same argument for food.
Right.
Your anorexia nervosa. Are you pathologizing that I just don't like you very much?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Are you body shaming me? And it's no, that there has to be not just clinically significant distress, but these other criteria that we sort of use to indicate it's now compulsive, which has a psychological definition to it. It's outside of your ability to control. Therefore, it's okay for us to treat it with psychology, right? So that's where Dr. Lay and I have a huge disagreement, besides the fact I don't think he has a concept of what addiction is. To me, another argument against his report here is he says, religiosity, and the study was done in America. The World Health Organization believes that it's an addiction. And if you go through the world, yeah, you'll find Christianity and other religions, but Europe and different sectors of Europe are, like, very much atheist. And, like, that's very much in vogue in a lot of places. Or very secular. And, they, not all forms of medicine have some puritanical, like, Utah kind of mentality to it. And so, again, I just really disagree with Dr. Lay. I think he's way off base. There's been this huge debate, and we've mentioned this in a previous show, but the big, huge sides of the debate are the APA on one side, which is the American Psychological Association, and ASECT on the other, which is the American Association of Sexologists, Educators, Sex Therapists, and Advocates. And the ASECT team basically says, listen, do not pathologize sex, never talk about sex in a negative way. There is no such thing as sex addiction. There's no such thing as porn addiction. And the APA and NADAC, by the way, which is the Association of Addiction Professionals, and the WHO, the World Health Organization, all look at them and go, guys, it is. It is a thing, just like gambling addiction's a thing. There's such thing as process addictions. And Nick, you've spelled out very carefully on a show about the dopamine cycle in the brain. We're talking about how the brain rewires. It's not about morality. It's not about pathologizing. It's just about the compulsive and obsessive nature of a disease, which is a brain link that we call addiction. And that can happen. Whether you're addicted to sniffing glue or you're addicted to porn, it can happen. It can be beyond your ability to stop it.
Right. And the thing that, I think I brought this up before in the example when talking about video game addiction. And the problem with studying video game addiction is because there's no specific agreed upon diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah. There's no formal diagnosis. So it becomes very difficult when you study it, because then you have to try to figure out, well, what, this research right here is showing this result. Well, what did they use to determine that this population meets criteria?
Right.
So for the most part, we just use the substance use disorder criteria for other process addictions.
Yeah.
And you could make an argument that maybe those don't fit 100%, or they don't fit completely well. For example, like with gambling, I mean, there's some criteria that don't really fit really well with gambling use, such as like withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
So there's some kind of psychological stuff, but it doesn't it doesn't fit. It's not a good fit for it.
But nobody disputes that there is such a thing as compulsive gambling.
Right.
Or even video game. Like, I have a big problem with this. Like, I'm always asked, like, is my son or daughter addicted to video games? And I'm usually the guy dragging my feet and going, I don't like that. Like, I don't like pathologizing a kid recreating and playing, because we don't say, is he addicted to playing jacks, or was he addicted to Pokemon, like back in the day? But now that it's on a TV screen, we're pathologizing it. And I'm kind of bothered by that. But again, we can apply the criteria of addiction to almost anything. Food, video games, gambling, sex, pornography. And all of these habits are healthy in context, but can be taken to a place where the person experiences not just clinical distress, but negative consequences, and they cannot stop despite that. If you're losing your marriage, losing your job, or going to jail, if you're Jared the Subway guy, and you compulsively used pornography and went down a rabbit hole to the point where you were starting to view illegal things, and you couldn't stop despite negative consequences, yeah, I think we're allowed to treat you. That's not to excuse his behavior, but it is to say the man seriously needed help. But, if Dr. Lay had his way, we'd all go, nope, he's just another healthy sexual guy in the world. And it's like, man, at some point you have to take stock of the consequences of their actions. If they can't stop or cut back, they need help. And if they're asking for help, we should give it to them.
And I think a big criteria, too, that we look at is, just setting limits.
Right.
And not being able to stick to them.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one, too. So you can see that in porn, where people are like, yes, I look at porn, but only at home.
Right.
And then the next thing they know, they're at work.
Right. Because that's what alcoholics will do. They'll make deals. Right. They'll go, okay, no more liquor, or okay, only socially, or okay, never when I'm sad, or okay, never past a certain time, or okay, always with food. But it doesn't matter. If you keep breaking your own boundaries, it comes back to this problem. And if it's a problem cycle, it deserves to be treated. So, Dr. Lay, respectfully, the World Health Organization disagrees with you, the APA disagrees with you, NADAC disagrees with you, and so does Pod Therapy. Boom.
Shots fired.
Shots fired, Lay.
So, come on to the show.
No, don't. We're literally in my sex dungeon right now. This would not be the place. I'm gonna be indicted on this guy. No way.
All right. Well, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we will look at some work tips. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Hey, listeners, do you hate ads in podcasts?
No.
Not anymore, because we have a new Patreon. Go to patreon.com/therapy, and you can sign up to sponsor the show. We have opened only 8 slots for people that get the coveted right to sponsor the show, and you can become a Theraproducer. And so what that means is that you'll be able to give us something to read on air during these breaks, or you could leave a message and actually we'll play your voice on the show. We need you guys. We want this to be a show that's listener-driven, listener-sponsored, and each of you probably has a message of hope and support that others really need to hear. So go to patreon.com/therapy and consider signing up as a $1 a month Therapal, as a $5 a month Therapod, which is a lot of fun. You get a cool dinosaur head, or as a $20 a month producer. Whatever's right for you guys. We want to thank you for being listeners. Thank you for joining our fan club, and thank you for contributing to the hope and the meaningful rapport that this show hopes to generate. We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our next question is from somebody who discovered their sister is anorexic and proud of it. Okay, this one is titled, I discovered my sister is pro-Anna through her Instagram page. What can I do? For those who don't know, pro-Anna means a person believes anorexia is a valid lifestyle choice. I knew my sister was skinny. She looked like a supermodel and weighed less than me. Family and she claim it's just genetics, so I thought it was. Sorry if my thoughts are a little jumbled, but I'm really worried. Recently I made an Instagram account, and I was scrolling through some pages on Discover. I found this picture of someone's thigh gap and looked through the page. This page has 2.7 thousand followers, and it was all photos of the person's thighs, stomach, shoulders. Then I spotted a very distinct jewelry case in one of the backgrounds of a picture. The jewelry case cost up to thousands and seems extremely familiar. I dug through her page and found more objects that are identical to my sister's belongings. I'm 99% sure it's her, but I don't know how to confront and help her. My family's supportive of her because that's how skinny Asian girls are, but her bio says her goal weight is only 40 kilograms, which is way too light for her height. How can I help her? What should I even do?
Okay, well, I'm going to be the stupid American. What's 40 kilograms?
Oh, man. You are asking the wrong guy. I got nothing.
Hold on, listeners. We got to look this up.
Let's ask our friend in Brazil. I think they use the metric system. Actually, I think everybody uses the metric system except for us.
Isn't that like 85 pounds?
All right, I'm going to let Nick look that up. Okay. But I think that a couple of things are really interesting here. A, Nick and I have no clue how to use the metric system. B, we have an Instagram for Pod Therapy. It has 4 followers. We have never posted anything.
We don't even have a profile picture.
It's terrible. So we're way out of our league on this. But no, I will speak to this while you're looking it up, because I am curious as to exactly how much 40 kilogram is. But I was a high school teacher for a number of years, for about 8 years. And I remember I had a young lady who I ended up, I think she was a student of mine when she was a sophomore, and I had her all the way till she graduated. And each year she got really, really skinnier, and it became skeletal and something that I had really noticed and become worried about. And at the time I was doing grad school, and I got a hold of her sister, who was just a few years younger than her, and we chatted about it, and her sister said, I'm really worried about her. This is something that, has really caught my eye too. It's way, less than I think she should be. And then the sister came to me one day and told me something very similar to what this article says, what this writer wrote. She basically said, listen, I found out that she's pro-Anna. And at the time I didn't know what that was, but the sister explained, like, pro-anorexia. Like, anorexia is a lifestyle choice, like a valid one. And lots of other women and men support this and are like encouraging. And it's like what that person just said in the Instagram, that they have 2,500 followers, and lots of people are like, yeah, you go, you're doing awesome. And it's like a movement. And I remember talking to the girl who actually was anorexic and discussing it with her. And I asked her, like, do you know what anorexia is? And I thought I was going to explain it to her, but she explained it to me. She was like, oh yeah, no, I know exactly what it is. Here's how I do it. And I was like, oh, and Nick, it's a profound thing to think about, right? Because she was under 18, so I got her parents involved. We talked about it. Her hair was falling out. It was getting so bad. And she was just really, really unhealthy. And it was very difficult to talk to her because she was almost, and I use this word lightly, but addicted to it in a sense. Like, she was in pre-contemplation. She didn't see that it was a problem. And in fact, she was enthusiastic about it. But that's apparently what the pro-Anna community is all about, is like enthusiastically supporting this as a lifestyle choice, despite health consequences. They totally accept that there are health consequences, but they think it's a good idea.
Yeah, so for the listeners who already know the answer to this, I'll just explain.
Oh, did you figure out what 40 kilograms is?
It's 88 pounds.
88 pounds.
Yeah,
wow.
So I was pretty close.
My 8-year-old is close to that.
Yeah, I know.
Jeez, that's something.
Scary little.
Yeah, that's really tiny. For an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's underweight. So, I mean, we're talking about being pro anorexia, and the writer's asking, I mean, how can I even talk to her about this? I think it's her. I don't even have confirmation. I'll tell you this, writer, the very first thing I want you to do, I want you to talk to your sister. Because you've noticed your sister is probably underweight. You've noticed that there's probably a health thing. You've heard it just, kicked down the road as an excuse of, oh, it's just genetics. And so you've overlooked it. But now you have good reason to believe that, this is probably an intentional choice on her part. And she is adopting a lifestyle of anorexia. I think at the bare minimum, you need to have a conversation with her and ask, is this what's going on? Is this your page? And is this your choice, and what is your stance on that at a bare minimum? Yeah,
I definitely express a lot of concern. I would always encourage people to come at this from the perspective of love, support, and concern. Obviously, there are some pretty serious health consequences to this. If she wants to call it a lifestyle choice, fine. But even lifestyle choices have very negative consequences, and it's not wrong to express your concern about that.
Yeah. What's been interesting, Nick, is I've seen both sides of this debate taken to the extreme. So I've seen the pro-Anna camp that says, hey, my body, my choice. Do not shame me. I'm not going to fit into an image that, you think women are healthy or men are healthy at this weight. And I've also seen the exact reverse, where there's been this anti-body shaming movement, where there's people that are, what would be medically described as morbidly obese. And they're saying, well, this is my choice. I choose this weight and I will not be shamed. And, people will say words like health, like, hey, but what about health? Is that a meaningful value? And they'll say, you know what, that's kind of a bait, and that's a misconception, that's a fallacy. Using that word is actually like hate speech, like, your body.
Hate speech.
That's what I've heard. I've heard people get really, really passionate about this, and they'll say, you know what, you're body shaming me, and, using the word health is just another way that you approach shaming me because, it doesn't matter. And so I've seen this on both sides, and as therapists, this is very much inside of our sandbox because this is an intentional behavioral choice that affects this human's ability to survive and ultimately be healthy. It does matter, and
Sure.
That's something that we should address. So I just think it's something like if you're out there and you're thinking, gosh, do you know anybody who's, on one side of the spectrum or the other and very proud of it? And, is that something that ought to be addressed?
I guess, I look at this from the perspective of, you brought up like with the body shaming and what society determines is an appropriate look or size for a person. That's all subjective, and I agree. That's not a very good argument.
Sure.
I would never come at somebody and say, you need to gain weight or you need to lose weight because society has determined that this is your appropriate weight and you need to look like this in order to be attractive and fit in. I definitely agree. That is not the right approach. That's subjective. To me, health is a lot more objective.
Mm-hmm.
If you are so malnourished, your hair is falling out, that's not subjective. That's objective. We can see what's happening. If we're approaching this from the perspective of weight, and I realize that I'm not the victim here in this situation,
right? So
maybe there's probably some components here that I'm speaking out of school about, and I'm not fully educated on. I get that. But if we're coming at this from the perspective of what is healthy and what your body needs for survival, I think that's a fair argument. I think that at a minimum that should be open for discussion.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I like your point, right? Because it's one thing to say, don't shame me, I'm not going to fall into society's definition. Okay, fine. Yeah, we agree with that. We're healthcare professionals, right? So we're going to measure this by your choices' effect on your body. Your hair's falling out, you're missing your period. Like, this is not good for you anymore. You have no energy. You're falling asleep in class. Like, you're becoming skeletal. Like, your blood pressure's, like, there's problems with this. And, I agree with you. I think that that's the standard we have to use. One of the things we've got colleagues in the community that really specialize in this, and there's some female therapists I know. I used to share an office with one who really this was her speciality, and she had a scale in our office that she would put her patients on every single session, and she would keep a log of what their weight was, and she would set a goal for them because that was the objective measurement of progress, was essentially, are you gaining weight, are you adding to your health? But one of the things that she's told me about that was that one of the things that makes anorexia or bulimia very interesting is that it is sort of a choice. People won't describe this as happening to them without explanation. They're aware that because of their own feelings, fears, problems, pain, they are intentionally malnourishing or intentionally having an abusive or dangerous relationship with food. And so in some ways I think we can relate to that, especially from an addiction standpoint, in that it doesn't fall out of the sky and happen to you like schizophrenia. It's sort of what we've referred to in the past like a disease of choice. And so motivation and stage of change probably plays a big part in how you ultimately treat somebody with this.
Sure. And then you've got the added component of the feedback that you get from other people sometimes is supporting your decision. I mean, so from that perspective, it gets even more complicated than addiction because, there aren't too many people who are using meth, and then you've got people around them saying, hey,
yeah, right.
You're looking really good.
Yeah, right. This
You're
is
looking great. I like what you've done with your teeth falling out.
Getting rid of all those teeth getting in the way of the meth pipe.
Yeah. So
very efficient.
But then when you get into stuff like this, like it does, like she's got so many followers, like the whole thing becomes, it becomes very difficult to recognize problems because your perspective gets so diluted with all of the other information coming in that says you're doing the right thing.
I agree. And this is the bandwagon effect that has changed a lot of our career and changed how healthcare works. Because when we treat addiction, we try to tell people, get away from people, places, and things that advocate for doing this, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody who's enthusiastic about this, anybody who has not taken a position of in recovery, intentionally living a life separate from these abusive substances, is dangerous for you and could easily trigger you and tempt you to come back into this and make it seem like no big deal, or even make it seem like it's a great thing. They're enthusiastic drug users. And I think that that's where Pro-Ana is very similar to that, because it is a movement of encouragement and like a support group to help people reach their goal of like premature death. Right. And it's almost that insane. Now, I'm sure there's somebody listening who might say, listen, it's not quite as dark as all that. There are some boundaries, some guidelines, some rails here. Maybe. But, guys, if you know anybody out there that's going through this, and to the listener, I'm going to tell you right now, my first advice is you need to confront your sister. And I want to go with what Nick said, right? You do it in a tone of love, in genuine concern, non-judgment. You come to her and you say, listen, I'm worried. Is this you? Is this your profile? Are you pro-Ana? And can we discuss this? And invite other parts of your family to be involved in this. And ask if she'd be willing to sit down with a therapist and at least discuss why she's reached these choices, because they affect her health. These are permanent decisions she's making.
Yeah, or even get her, her primary physician on board.
Yes.
And get, it's quite possible she hasn't seen a doctor in a long time, because I can't imagine a doctor would just be perfectly fine and not express any concern about her low weight.
Yeah, or she might be hiding it. Yeah. They're already using excuses like, oh, it's just genetics, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, especially if you're another female with those exact same genetics and you don't have that weight, and then you probably are thinking, geez, I'm a balloon, man. I'm so huge. What's the deal? No, you're not. You're probably the real genetics, and she's the one faking it. So, to the writer, though, listen, my heart is with you. You need to take anorexia very seriously. Okay, this is a cause of death. It is a cause of permanent organ failure and hair loss and inability to make the reproductive system function. And we see it in women and in men. But it is something that ought to be taken seriously. I am not a supporter of things like pro-Ana. I think it is an overhyped, misguided effort to, be encouraging of bad ideas. So I encourage you to come to your sister honestly and proactively and talk about this and see where that conversation goes.
Yeah, thank you for writing in.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we've got a question about a girlfriend who won't post pictures on social media. You're listening to Pod Therapy. Hey, Therapals, have you purchased your ticket to Scoop Fest 2018 yet?
Salt pork!
Salt pork? That's a long story. We'll explain it later. Our friends, Matt, Paul, and Jacob, over at the Ice Cream Social, are working very hard putting together their third annual weekend-long comedy and podcast festival in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada, October 12th through the 14th.
October 12, 13, and 14.
Enjoy live comedy, variety shows, the Scoop Talent Show, the Jock vs. Nerd Costume Ball, and much, much more. And guess what? They're having live recordings of podcasts.
What kind of podcast, Nick?
Guess what podcast is going to be there?
I mean, like good ones probably. Like maybe
most
Penn
of them
Sunday
are.
School.
There's
Is
one
that
that's
gonna be
not
there?
so good.
Okay. Can I guess which one that is? So is Penn Sunday School going to be on it?
You're right.
Oh my gosh, what about Player One?
Player One's there.
And of course Ice Cream Social.
Of course.
Oh my gosh, those are some of my favorite podcasts, but I really hope they don't invite those Pod Therapy dudes.
Yeah, what is your least favorite podcast?
Definitely Pod Therapy.
Yeah, they're going to be there.
Oh, well there goes the
so
whole
it's
show.
Almost a killer lineup.
Except for that one.
Except for one flaw.
Flat tire.
So if you enjoy live podcasts, be sure to get your ticket. And guess what? If you go to heyscoops.com/therapy, there is a $40 discount with your name on it. So buy your tickets through heyscoops.com/therapy.
We're back. You're listening to Pod Therapy, and our next listener writes in asking why his girlfriend doesn't post pictures of him.
Okay, this writer writes in, my girlfriend won't post a single picture of me on social media. So my girlfriend refuses to post any pictures with me. When I bring it up, she says that in the past she's posted pictures with boyfriends and it hasn't worked out, and she wants to keep our relationship a secret. All of her friends and family know about me, but as far as social media goes, I don't exist. She also says that she feels like she's being claimed on social media if she posts pictures with me. I told her it really bugs me, and honestly, I think it's what dating is. Like she claimed me and I claimed her. It'd be one thing if we never posted any pictures, but she frequently posts pictures. For example, we went to a wedding and she posted a picture of herself with the caption, "My +1 is wine." Then we went on a week-long vacation together and still no pictures. I've been dating her for around 2 years and this has always bugged me, but lately I can't ignore it. I bring it up to her and she gets really defensive and says, "You know how I feel," but it genuinely hurts my feelings. I don't need to be in all of the pictures, but it would at least be nice to be in one. I just feel as if she's ashamed of me or something, and that really hurts because I'm so proud of her. Any advice?
Okay, this might be one of those things where we need women again to come in and tell us what the real deal is.
That seems to be the theme happening with this show lately.
Every episode we're like, all right, here's our best first draft, and we'll apologize for it in the next episode. But honestly, Nick, this really bugs me. Like, I look at this and go, what? Like, you went to a wedding with your girlfriend. She intentionally posts, "My +1 is wine," to imply to others that she, like, that's not just saying... that's not an omission, right? That's not just saying there is no boyfriend in this picture. It's kind of misleading the public into believing there isn't a boyfriend. And that's really going beyond. And that kind of like makes his point where he's like, yeah, like you're not just not including me, you're sort of falsifying. Like you're sort of falsely presenting yourself as if you are single. And this is becoming a problem for me, right? Because that is part of our lives. It's part of your public persona, and I feel like I'm not included in it. That really bugs me, man. I mean, one time you and I were joking that, do you have to wear a wedding ring? That was a question we got.
Right.
And we were like, well, I mean, no, but you better change your Facebook profile. As long as you do that, like, that's the minimum. But I don't know, man. My first take is like, gosh, what's this person up to? I don't know.
So, yeah, when I read this is the first time I'd read it. I had read the caption that you put on here ahead of time.
Yeah.
And my immediate thought was, well, this isn't going to last.
Oh,
so
yeah.
reading this, I was surprised that they've been together for 2 years.
Yeah.
That actually really shocked me. I've been in a similar situation. I've dated somebody, and she would not post pictures of me or didn't change her status or anything on Facebook.
Oh, really?
But it didn't last. Like, it was a really, really short thing.
It was kind of that, like, not honeymoon, but the girlfriend makes a good point in the article, too, or in the question, where she says, I've been burned in the past. I've done the announcement thing, and then now I have to unannounce it, or everybody's asking me why we didn't last. So in your story, that sounds like what was going on. Like, the girl's saying, well, let's give it some time here.
Yes.
Before I make it, like, Facebook official.
Right, which was fine. Like,
but it wasn't 2 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
2 years later, even if it was something like, I'm afraid that by doing this, I'm going to jinx the relationship.
Right.
I would think after 2 years,
yeah,
it would be to the point where, okay, we can probably, it's
I
probably
agree.
safe at this point.
Yeah, and this excuse that, well, gee, I don't like being claimed. And his argument is, but isn't that kind of what dating is? Like, like, it's monogamy, right? Like, that's the whole concept, is like, I have sort of said, I am not available. I am not on the market anymore. I'm with you. And you kind of do the same. So, like, that kind of goes back to what's she like at work? Like, if her work friends are like, oh, how was that wedding this weekend? And she's like, my +1 was wine. Like, ha ha ha. Like, she doesn't tell them she has a boyfriend. That's a pretty important omission, right? And then, like, it's also misleading other people. If you did that in the here and now with real humans that you interact with, it would seem really suspicious. I think that applies online, too. I don't think online is some, like, special space where, like, if you're using fake names and it's not, really you, then yeah. But, I mean, if this is your freaking Facebook or whatever, like, it does matter.
Yeah. I can relate to you, the listener, in how you felt seeing that. I would feel pretty hurt by that, too.
Yeah.
If my significant other posts a picture and
2
claims
years and then says my +1 is wine.
And
I promise you, Nick, she hasn't posted a picture of this dude in 2 years because she's not sure if it's going to work out. But if she gets new shoes tomorrow, there's pictures. She's also posting pictures of her lunch. Like, so there's a lot of things that she's not committed to. Like, those things are going up. Like, if she gets a new car right now, it's going online. But, like, she won't post pictures of this guy because it might be awkward one day to tell people it didn't work out.
Right.
That's too much.
Is there any way, Jim, that you can look at this situation and empathize with her in that I see that she has a point about blank?
Yes, I guess. Like, if you've had bad relationships, and I get this, the newest reality in dating now is this extra dynamic. Because in the olden days, you were held accountable for how you interacted with your significant other's coworkers and friends whenever you saw them, right? And so, like, there was only so many areas that you could really be a burden to them. But now in online universe, you can really interact with a lot of their life, and you can be a real problem for them. If you're awkward, or if somebody comments, and, like, girls post lots of pictures of themselves, and so, like, if lots of her friends, men and women, comment and say, oh, you're beautiful, whatever, and then, like, you have this boyfriend who's on there like, what are you talking about, punk? Like, what's that supposed to mean? Like, some crazy guy? I can see where she's now reluctant, and she's like, you know what, I just don't even want to post things with you. I'm just kind of excluding you from this part of my world. This is just an innocent part of my world. It doesn't mean to me what it means to you. But this comes back to something you say a lot, which is that it's not the thing that happened. It's the meaning of the thing that happened.
Right.
And in her defense, the meaning of this might not be significant. She might look at this and go, no, man, this is the place I share cat videos. This doesn't mean anything. What matters is my dad has met you. What matters is that my family knows you.
Yeah,
that's who counts.
That's a good point. Yeah, so I mean, and that's another variable here too, where it almost kind of seems like we've got a different story, in that the family knows about him, Her friends know about him. Everybody, it seems, knows about him. It's just he's not part of her image on social media.
Yeah.
So if you're making that argument, then I can agree with that, and that maybe this is just, well, it's social media. It doesn't. It's not that important to me. It doesn't mean much to me. So that's a good point.
You know what might be happening here? Let me play really deep devil's advocate. Watch what's going to happen. She's going to write into the show, and she's going to go, hey, here's the rest of the story you didn't know. The social media he's talking about is LinkedIn. Like, I only use LinkedIn, and I don't post anything about him or any pictures.
Okay. First of all, that's BS, because no one uses LinkedIn.
I am all about LinkedIn.
Yeah, well, then you probably know her.
But watch it be something like that. But also what's interesting, though, and this brings us to my point about LinkedIn, each social media platform has its own rules. And, like, I kind of know the rules for Twitter. Twitter's not personal. Like, Twitter is a place for me to yell at Domino's whenever my pizza's late. That's mostly what I use Twitter for. Instagram is apparently not super personal either. It's just a place to highlight snapshots of the universe and, get a lot of compliments on things. Like, that's pretty much the concept as far as I can see it. You and I don't know because we still have a terrible Instagram. We don't know how to use it.
And a big thank you to our 4 followers.
Yeah.
Who follow us anyway.
You people are the real ones. All you other listeners, you do not count, okay? Yeah. Those 4 heroes who followed us on Instagram before anybody else, there's nothing even there. They are loyal. But, that's an interesting point about what social media is it, but I mean, I'd be interested in what the listeners think. Is this something that needs to be thought of in our digital culture? It's meaningful to omit a relationship online and to not talk about it. And, we've taken these kinds of questions before, Nick, where people, ex-girlfriend or somebody, messages a guy and says, oh, how are you doing? And they're talking and he never mentions that he's in a relationship.
Sure.
And that would be not okay. We'd all go, oh, come on, man. Like, you knew what you were doing. You're not an idiot.
Yeah.
But if you're just doing that really publicly and assertively, proactively, just not admitting this person exists, and then you tell them I'm not going to admit you exist, now we're okay with it. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it's kind of like how Trump is totally committing collusion, just he's doing it in public. It's like the same thing. Like, if you do it secretly, it's an issue. But if you do it out loud, I guess we're okay with it. Like, that's kind of what she's doing. She's colluding with the Russians, Nick.
Yeah, and I'm also wondering, too, what her friends think of that.
Yeah, right.
Is this a red flag for any of them? And then also, what is the rest of the relationship like?
Yeah.
Because he's making the argument in here stating that I feel like she is ashamed of me. And if the listener were here, one of the questions I would like to ask him is, do you get this vibe anyplace else outside of social media?
Right.
What's the relationship like outside of that? Do you feel like she's ashamed of you when you guys are out together in public or when you go places together? What is that like? I don't know. There's a lot of information I'd want to gather.
Yeah. No, but okay. So to the listener, first off, I think you get the feeling that we're probably with you on this. We're kind of validating your disappointment and your confusion about this. So I'm with you on that. As far as trying to get solution focused, I would try to think about areas in your life where maybe she has had a feeling of insecurity or a feeling of wondering whether or not, you're validating the relationship, and bringing that example to her to maybe try to help her understand what your perspective is and what you're feeling. At this time, it sounds like she doesn't even admit that she can empathize with your perspective at all, which is a real gap. Whenever both of you are speaking different languages on an issue, that's really a problem. But, I would challenge you to maybe try to have that. It sounds like you've already really attempted a rigorous conversation on this several times. You've brought it up. And, it's unfortunate because it just, the meaning of this social media and what it means to be acknowledged in public, I'm with you. I think the majority of listeners probably see it from your perspective. But for whatever reason, your girlfriend either A, really honestly with all of her genuine heart does not see it from your perspective, B, has some kind of past trauma about this that stops her from being okay with it, or C, is sort of behaving suspiciously and trying to keep her options open, or enjoys the flattery and doesn't want to give that up by letting everybody know that she's sort of taken. So, any of those, I think it's going to be solved with vigorous communication and hopefully getting somebody else involved. But I like your point, Nick, of a third party. What does a friend think about this? Somebody that really speaks her language.
Yeah, that would be interesting to kind of hear. So,
yeah. But listeners, we need you again. We need you to write in. We need to know, is this normal? What's the deal?
Yeah, because everything about this to me just really kind of rubs me the wrong way. I feel very uncomfortable with
the wedding thing really was wrong to me. Like, you're intentionally declaring a falsehood. My +1 is wine. And I get that it's a
Even
cheeky
if it's
little
a joke.
Yeah, but no, you're intentionally misleading people. I didn't have a date.
Yeah.
But don't acknowledge the 2-year relationship over my shoulder in the background,
Yeah, right. I mean, could have just easily said, totally here by myself.
Yeah, right.
No one else, just me.
You know what? I think I've actually just solved this riddle. Okay, here's my theory. Okay. Ready? And this goes out to my friends at Fan Theory World. How they're always coming up with like an alternative explanation. Here's my alternative explanation. This is Instagram that she's talking about, and he's an Instagram boyfriend. Have you ever seen the videos of these Instagram boyfriends? So these are the men that carry around the phones that take pictures of the girls.
Oh,
and so like if you go to the beach, you see a line of women like in the sand, like doing the duck face, and all these dudes sitting there snapping shots, drinking a coffee, and like it's just hilarious because they're Instagram boyfriends, and so like that's probably what it is, dude. It's not that she's ashamed of you; it's that you're her cameraman, and so you're just taking all the pictures, and she's not about to give that up. You're not getting into the frame because she needs you on the other side of the camera.
Sure.
That's the deal.
And if there was only 2 human beings at that wedding,
that's right,
and one of them had to be the cameraman,
it's you.
Your theory makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there were more people there.
No.
Anybody could have snapped that photo.
No. I'm telling you.
I don't know.
I want the Fan Theory guys to write in with this one and give us the real deal.
Yeah. This doesn't feel good to me.
Conspiracy.
Does not feel good to me at all. But good luck. And right back in. Let us know. Give us an update.
Yeah. Let us know how that turns out.
Okay, so we've come to the next section of the show, which is apologies, corrections, and comments,
We're sorry.
reviews. Do we have anybody we need to apologize to this week?
America. I think we could start with that. I would like to apologize to the metric system for not knowing it. I'd like to apologize to Instagram. We've done them no justice today.
And I would like to apologize to all of the Americans who actually do know the metric system.
All of scientists who actually know it.
We're sorry for obviously representing us in a horrible light.
Yeah, and as you heard earlier in our little ad break, we have officially opened up our Patreon. So the deal is that we want Pod Therapy to not just be ours. We want to share that experience of ownership and responsibility with others, because the mission of this show was to destigmatize mental health, to be able to talk about real life issues, real life dramas, real life problems with real life people who are real life hurting with real life therapists. And our hope was that we would get to introduce therapy and introduce the experience of talking to a therapist to folks who maybe would never have access to that. And we live in a country, in America anyway, that has a mental health crisis and a mental health drought. Mm-hmm. And so it was really meaningful for us to bring this show to the front, because we wanted this to be an intersection where it's good humor and warm and approachable, but also meaningful. And so if you are passionate about the show, if you're passionate about mental health, then we invite you to go to patreon.com/therapy. We've created 3 tiers, and so we should actually explain what those are and what we're going to do. But the very first level is $1 a month. You could sign up as $1 a month giver, and if you do, then you will officially be
a Therapal.
A Therapal. A member of the fan club. So you can be a card-carrying Therapal for $1 a month. And if you sign up, then our new commitment to you is that when you sign up that very same week, we are going to announce you on the show and thank you for your patronage and thank you for joining the team and being a Therapal, an advocate for mental health, helping us get the show out to the world. If you donate $5 a month, you can upgrade to a
Therapod.
Yes, and I continue to thank the person who gave us this on Twitter. So we've officially named our followers the Therapals, but we also believe that there is an elite unit among the Therapals, and they are the Therapods. And you have to go on to patreon.com/therapy to see, but there is an image of this, and it's basically a velociraptor wearing a suit, smoking a pipe. But yeah, that could be you. You could be not just a mental health advocate, but an advocate for all sentient species to have access to good therapy.
Yeah.
But if you want to take it even further, we have opened up only 8 spots, the Elite 8, and these folks are what we're calling the theraproducers. And these are the folks that can give us a quote, a lyric, a statement. They can record their voice, and we will actually put it into our ad spot in the 2 ad spots that we do every week throughout the month. And we'll do that once a month for that person. And you can actually broadcast your own message, whether that's you endorsing mental health or giving people a shout out or encouraging people or sharing a quote or sharing a book title. This is us broadcasting your words. Now, we are going to have editorial oversight, right, Nick? Because we're scared that somebody's going to sign up and be like,
jet fuel can't melt steel girders.
Right, that's going to be the first one. But if you would like to sign up as a theraproducer, we're only opening up 8 slots. You can go to patreon.com/therapy, and you can sign up for that. And we would love to have you guys. And so anyway, it's now officially open. Join us on patreon.com/therapy. You'll have access to bonus content. We will thank you on the air. If you are a TheraPal, if you're a TheraPod, we'll thank you on the air and every month. And if you are a TheraProducer, we will actually read what you submit during our ad breaks. But thank you guys for joining this mission and being part of our community. It has really become a healthy and wellness-minded community, and we think that we have some of the best listeners in the world. So
Absolutely.
that's all the time that we've got for this week's session. Thank you to those who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Help us reach others by sharing this episode. You can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and now on Patreon at patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to add your own advice to today's questions? Post your thoughts at podtherapy.net and join the conversation. I'm Nick Tangeman.
I'm Jim Jobin.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.